Well, good afternoon to everybody. Blessings on your life. It's another day that the Lord has made, and we're going to rejoice and be glad in it. It's Wednesday and it is hump day. I am excited. I'm glad. I want to bring your attention. To the book of Genesis. And you all know that Genesis is like my favorite book. The book of Genesis, chapter number 28. And we're going to read at verse 16, chapter 28, verse 16. And it says here, and Jacob awaked out of his sleep. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep. And he said, surely the Lord is in this place. And I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God. What a revelation. And this is the gate of heaven. I want to read that again because I want that to get inside your soul and your spirit. It's very key, very germane to where we are today in our society, in our lives, in our families, and in everything that we do. Verse 16 says, and Jacob awaked out of his sleep. He awaked out of his sleep. And he said, surely the Lord is in this place. An awakening, a revelation, a discovery. The Lord is in this place. He says, but here's the issue. He says, I did not know it. I knew it not. He's been around me. He's been in this place. He's been in this environment. He's been in these circumstances. He says, but I did not recognize that it was God in this place. And he was afraid. I'm afraid now because now I have a fresh set of eyes. I have new lenses. The purview is different. My perspective is different now. And he says, and now I don't really know what to do because the way that I thought was right, now I see differently. And I'm noticing that it is wrong. It's not quite like I thought it was supposed to be. It's not quite like I thought it should be. Says, I was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God. Now, a lot of times we think that what we're doing it based upon our own merit, our own strength, upon our own accord, our own wishes, our own desires, not realizing that God has ownership over everything. Stay with me. And this is the gate of heaven. I need to realize something, that there's an ushering in and there's an ushering out. There is a going up and there is a going down. There is a coming in and a going out. There's a release. There's a gate. And in this gate, God controls the door. He controls what happens on earth and he controls what happens in heaven. But I didn't have a saving knowledge of this. And now all of a sudden I've awakened to a saving knowledge that ultimately I am in receipt now that God is in control. I didn't know it before, but now I realize that God is in control. I want to talk to you on this wonderful, beautiful afternoon, this Wednesday, just in brief, a very truncated message. Quickly, I want to talk to you from the subject, woke to what? Not woke for what, but woke to what? Woke to what? It's been a very famous headline. It is a what do you call those? It's a popular saying. It's a pithy saying that that we have taken and run with um, uh, quite a bit. And we're holding tight to this thing called stay woke, stay woke. And so my question slash my challenge on today is woke to what? Woke to what? Now, what we have to understand here is that there is a smoke screen. There is a smoke screen that is happening in the world that we live in, and we need to examine this because in our text, in Genesis here, 28, Jacob, he goes to sleep, and while he's sleeping, he's having a dream, and he wakes up to a new reality. And I want to parallel this, and I want to contrast this to where we are, and hopefully it will give us a different insight or perspective to view the world. So we got to understand the smoke screen that we are in. This whole issue or this whole slogan of "Stay woke," it was really relegated out of the urgency, um, um, the the yearning, the desire to be recognized by certain sects or certain groups of people that felt that they were being undermined, that felt that they were being mistreated, misunderstood, discriminated against. And so now you have this thing where we've got to wake up. We got to be woke to uh, these emotions and these feelings. They need to be released. There's an implosion now that is pushing out an explosion of emotions and words. And it's not like we haven't felt this. People that's been dealing with racism, they've been dealing with it for a long time. But now this is the age of expression. Things that, you've shut me up. You put the knee on my throat, and the women are saying, and you wouldn't let me be me, and I couldn't talk, and this, that, and the other. Didn't treat me right, didn't treat me equal, didn't pay me equal. All these things now, we there's a consciousness, and we got to be woke about it. So stay woke. Now here's the smoke screen, and I'm saying some things that are touching your emotional state, your emotional palate, what you want to hear, because it resonates to how you feel. And this now becomes a very critical junction point, a very critical cross section of our lives and our reality. The smokescreen is racism, injustice. Racism, injustice. The smokescreen is sexism. The smokescreen is denial of the LGBTQRS alphabet community, their rights. The smokescreen is the Me Too movement. The smokescreen is women's right. I'm not saying that any of this stuff is not an issue or that it is not real. What I am saying, though, is that it is the smokescreen. I remember back in 2020, we were talking about a whole lot of things that happened before COVID-19. And all the things that happened up until COVID-19, we arrested our attention into all these little things that were mounting up to this and to that. It was an escalation of all types of things. And when that was going on, we thought that was very monumental. It was paramount. And then this happened, and we thought that was paramount and monumental. And then COVID hit, and when COVID hit, it shut down the country. And all of a sudden, the issue of police officers killing black boys and black men and all these other things that was going on, it seemed not to be as important. I didn't say that it wasn't important, but it seemed to be not as important as COVID-19, because COVID-19 took a precedent over everything. So the other things that had our attention, our focus, was really, in all actuality, when we look at the big picture, the global picture, the larger canopy was a smokescreen. I'm going somewhere. We had last night the debate between vice presidency, the red side and the blue side, Waltz and Vance, right? And in this debate, just to name a few, they dealt with some issues that we felt were very important. Some of the issues were tax incentives for startup businesses, border control. They want to know, what are we going to do with all these people coming in? We don't have a place for them. They don't have a right. We need to manage this a little bit better. Inflation, even tying that back to border control, because if we don't have control of the border and we got all these people coming in, then it's going to be a rise in inflation, because one thing addresses another thing, or it attaches to another thing, and it is cause and effect. Abortion rights, Roe versus Wade. We weighed in on that. They talked about that. What are you going to do? How do you feel about women having control over their own bodies? They talked about terrorists to a degree. On one side, it was that if we can place terrorists, or we can get control over imports and exports and all this, and control how we do business with other countries, it'll be better economically for the United States. They talked a little bit about fuel / fracking, because they figure that, if something happens abroad, then it's going to affect us, our resources coming in, which is going to cripple us. And so on one side, they feel that it's okay to manage it abroad. On the other side, they say, well, we need to invest more into fracking. We need to make, those resources more readily available from home. And we had one former president that was trying to do that before the president that we have in office today. And he said, we need to get back to fracking, and to see the value of that for the United States. The United States needs to they need to take care of the United States. They talked a little bit about child care and health care, very critical and important items to families, to mothers, to people that have pre-existing conditions, and so on and so forth. And how am I going to go to work because I don't have a place where I can drop my child off that's suitable and that is affordable, that I can trust for daycare, and all these become problematic and issues that we need to deal with. And so we have all these things going on, and I'm not saying that these are not relevant things. I'm saying that they could be a smokescreen, though, or they could be dotted lines, dashes to a smokescreen. It is, when we look at it as it relates to how we have postured ourselves towards a greater awareness, or a greater understanding. Now, I want to take us to the book of Genesis here real quick, because I want to make this not so long, but I want to teach just for a few seconds and give you some understanding, because this is very critical. In the book of Genesis, chapter number 2, beginning at verse number 7, it says this. It says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Now, let me say that again, because maybe you didn't quite get that. And the Lord God, he formed man out of the dust. It was, man came out of the particles that when the light hits it, we see all these little floaties in the air, and they drop to the ground. After you collect so much of it, it ain't nothing but dust. We call it dirt. And God takes what is really has no value to it and is nothing, and he forms man. What did I just say? I said God takes it and he forms man. Who has the power? Who has the wherewithal, the ability to make what you're listening to, what you're looking at right now, be in existence is God. So he takes the dust of the earth, he takes it out of the ground, and then he does something. The Bible says here is that he breathes into his nostrils. What did he breathe into his nostrils? God breathes himself into the nostrils of man, and the breath of life. He breathes himself into the nostrils of man. He breathes what? Himself, which is the breath of life, and man now becomes a living soul. He breathes a part of him. Without him, man has no existence. It's like putting a battery inside a drill, a battery operated drill, putting a battery inside of a car. Without the battery, you can have a car as beautiful as it can be, but without a battery, it is inoperable. It can't move. It can't serve a purpose. Why? Because there's nothing there that gives it power. There's nothing there that makes it relevant until that battery is implemented into the process. And so he takes up himself and he breathes himself into the nostrils, into the shell of a man, into his lungs, into his being now, and he becomes a living soul. That means that God creates him, he makes him to where he has an awareness. Because we're going back to Genesis 28. He makes him until he has an awareness, because other than that, the man is asleep. He's there in bodily form, in dirt and in dust, but there's no awareness to him until God breathes the breath of life into his nostrils and he becomes a living soul. Now watch this, because it's a lot here, but I ain't got time to get to all of it. Genesis 1:27 says this. So God created man in his own image. So God created man in his own image. Now, I know the prevailing thought and emotion and feeling now is that we want to separate ourselves from God. On last week, I talked about a no good Jesus, meaning that not that he's no good, but where we placed him, the honor that we've given him, the salutation that we have given him to Jesus. He says, am I any good? We're making him a no good Jesus, a no good, something that is good for nothing, a separation from man and from God, or man and life, man and choices. We're saying that we can do all this by ourselves and on our own. But in verse 27 of Genesis chapter number 1, it says, so God created man in his own image. He created the man in the image of God. In the image of God, he created man. Now, John 4:24 says this: God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So now he creates us in his image. John 4:24 says that God is spirit. So if he's in the image, and he created us in his image, and he is a spirit, he says that you have to be in the spirit to have fellowship or to worship with me. So now God is looking to engage into a spiritual interaction. A spiritual interaction. So how is it now that we can say, let's separate God in schools, let's separate God in government, let's separate God in our actions, our emotions, and our thoughts? How can we do all that if you believe the Bible? But if you don't believe the Bible, then let's just shut it all down right now. But for those of you that do believe the Bible and you're raising the bloodstained banner of Jesus Christ. But there's an issue here because you are in his image, but you have not recognized the image of God. And the reason why you have not is because you refuse to worship him in spirit and in truth. Now, he created him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish and over the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Now God is giving us charge, but he's given us charge based upon an environment, an understanding that it is a theocracy first before anything else. We have set the precedence as, and what we yearn for is a democracy. We want it to be the people's choice and what we want, but God is saying that it's got to be a theocracy. Now, I've been talking about this. The difference between a theocracy and a democracy is because where we are, this is where we are today. We want to exclude God because we said, God, we want a king. We want a king to rule as a democracy. We don't need you anymore. And God is saying that the most fair shake that you're going to get is going to come from me, even if you don't feel so great as we shake hands. I'm the best thing that you can ever have. But we say, no, God, we don't want that. Give us a king. And so now we're in a situation. We got a crisis on our hands. And so let's go back and look at again Genesis 28 and 16. Genesis 28 and 16, because here he says, Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and I'm almost done, and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. Surely I was going in a certain direction, and I had no place for God. That's the takeaway that I want you to get from this today, is that when Jacob, when he awaked out of his sleep, he awaked to something that he did not notice before. And this simple message today is to alert you, to put you on alert, that there is something that is going on around you that is bigger than you. And perhaps the direction that you've been going in is nothing but an illusion or a smokescreen. I didn't say that it wasn't real. I'm saying it's not as real as to what you need to be woke to. Because all of us are saying stay woke. And my challenge to you today is to stay woke to what? And so, in other words, when I wake up out of my sleep, what am I waking up for? I got up this morning. Was it just to get up to go work out? Was it just to get up to go to work? Was it just to get up to get on the phone and talk about nothing to whatever? Was it to wake up to do what I wanted to do? Was it to wake up to brainstorm about how much money I can make, or how I can get over on this person and that person and all that kind of stuff? How I could manipulate the system, how I can get somebody to believe in me, to feel for me, to have compassion on me, to say, woe is me, all my little issues that I got going on. That I wake up this morning and I must suppose stay woke to a Me Too movement, to a Black Lives Matter, to racism and inequalities and injustices, which all these things are very real and they have our attention. But do they have our attention to keep us arrested from what is really needed and going on around here? So Jacob, he woke up. When he woke up to a new awareness, revelation, and a life in Christ, a life in God. He says, surely, he says, I'm asleep. I've been asleep all this time. It goes on. He says, surely the Lord is in this place, not was, but he still is in this place. And he says, and I didn't know it. What we're dealing with right now, ladies and gentlemen, men and women of God, is we're dealing with a lack of awareness of God being around us and in us and through us. And so we are omitting God. We are discarding God as if he is no longer relevant, as if he is not a God, and we are resting and believe that we can rule our own lives and direct ourselves into whatever we want to do, whatever we want to be. And so now we're putting our trust and our hope in a man. What about Kamala? Vote her in. She can make a difference and make us all happy, and the world will go around and like it's supposed to again. Let's get Trump back in there. He can do the same thing. Forget about church. Forget about Jesus. Don't implement Jesus. Don't talk about Jesus. Don't pray. Don't pray to Jesus. Don't do none of these things. And Jesus be the first one to say, if you see me, you see God, you see the Father. If you hear me, you hear God, you hear the Father. But I don't want nothing to do with him. I don't, because why? Because Jesus is no good. He's no good for me. He's no good to me. Jesus, what have you done for me lately? I still got a deal with food stamps and all this stuff. I'm still sick in my body. I got a lot of stuff that's going on around me. And I heard about your Bible. I tried to read it, but I don't understand it. It don't make a whole lot of sense to me. A lot of stuff that's going on around don't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I make sense to myself. So I'm just going to ride with that thing right now. And as Dr. Phil was saying, how's that working for you? So my question now is, woke to what? Woke to what? Woke to yourself. Woke to your own understanding. And all that is an illusion. All of that is a smokescreen. Let me close. In Daniel chapter number 5, and I've been talking about this for a little bit now. Daniel chapter number 5, beginning at verse number 24. And it says this. And this is the second part of this. I'm reading the interpretation now of Daniel. And this is what he says here. It says, then was verse number 25. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, tekel, euphoresin, or euphoresin. Mene, tekel, euphoresin. I'm going to give you a word. I'm going to give you a prophetic utterance now. Okay, because we have already pitched our tent. We've already planted our feet. We've already made up our mind. We've already just rested in our emotions. And so this is the result and the reality of where this is going to go. Mene, tekel, eupharsin. What does that mean? This is what it means. It says, he says, mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Because of your heart. Now understand the background behind here was Belshazzar was the king, but he was mocking God. He took the things, the vessels out of Jerusalem, and Nebuchadnezzar was the one that did it, but Belshazzar followed in his tracks. And so he says, ain't no sense of having those wonderful vessels over there. He says, we're going to have our way with them. So he got all the people that mean something. Get all them. We're going to have a party. And we're going to use God's stuff. Forget God. We're not going to consult him. We don't care about him like we're doing right now in the government and all these different issues and stuff that we got going on. Forget about him. Let's just toast up and drink. So as a result of that, he says, God have numbered thy kingdom. And when we look around, because of the choices, the emotional choices, and the me's that you want to be, the me too, you know, my feelings, my emotions. He said, because you went that way and you wanted a king and you didn't want me, you denied me, you put me to the side, you kicked me to the curb, you didn't want nothing to do with me. He says, your days now, and I'm talking to America. He says, your days now are numbered. They has been numbered in the kingdom and finished it. Let me read that again. This is the interpretation of the king. Meaning, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. I done brought this whole thing to a close. You don't know it yet. You don't see it yet. The reason why you don't know it, you don't see it. This is another issue that I really don't have time to deal with. It's the issue of understanding what thou readest, the writing on the wall. Whose hand is it, and who's writing, and what is the hand, or what does the writing say? What does it mean? We are in a place right now because we have kicked God to the curb, and he's writing all around us. But instead of us reading the spiritual writing, because he said, let us make man in our image. Then we go to John 4:24. He says, God is spirit, if you're going to worship him in spirit and truth. Ain't no spirit around us. We have forgotten about the spirit part. We don't want to go back to Genesis 2:7. God made man and he breathed the breath of life in his nostrils, and man became a living soul. He gave him a part of him. But now we feel better separated from God. So there's no writing on the wall. So now the church don't know what to do, and the states don't know what to do. And so we just in a debacle right now. We got an issue that's going on around us. We got a crisis because we left God out. And so God is saying there's this writing on the wall, but nobody's there to read the writing, because the writing is spiritual. The writing is not in a language that you readily understand and take hold of, because you got to be in the spirit. You got to have a relationship with me in order to say in the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall is going to require a revelation. The writing on the wall is going to be in a dream when I wake up, and I'm going to say, surely the Lord was in this place and I knew it not. The writing on the wall means that I awake to the Lord, not to Me Too, not to LGBTQ, not to sexism issues, not to women's rights, men's rights, whatever it is, not to all that, but I awake to the Lord. Lord, what is it that you want me to do, or you want me to see? Watch this, and I'm done. Tekel, verse 27. Thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. America. God is saying that, number one, he says that the kingdom is coming to an end. Number two, he says, Tekel, thou have been weighed in the balances and you come up short. You have been found wanting. You need me, but you don't realize you need me. And so you have been found wanting because you wanted to do it your way. Thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Verse 28, Perez or Euphrons. Euphron, how you say that word? Thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. As I close, here's what's getting ready to happen, y'all. Because we refuse to have God in our affairs, these beautiful United States of America, and you just watch as it's already happened. You don't see it because now you got to walk into it. But see, I have spiritual eyes, and so I see it already. So I've been telling y'all that, yeah, both people that you can vote in, they both gonna be bad, but one is gonna be, like my daddy would say, from the country, far worse than the other one. And so you push and you knock down Trump. And go back to 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter, when God Samuel chose his sons. He put them there. He knew the sons wasn't no good. We all know Trump ain't no good. But if it's God's choice, it's better than your choice. It's my point. If it's God's choice. And so we don't want none of that. So now he says your kingdom, or not necessarily your kingdom, but how does it say it here? He says right here, Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. This is what that means. It means that United States is getting ready to start coming under, it's going to slide into third world territory. That means that it's going to be, you're no longer going to be the superpower. It's going to be other kingdoms now that you're going to start beating to their drummer. That's what the Medes and the Persians were. And that's not God's will. It's going to be his permissive will, though. Why? Because you have been found wanting, because you don't want him, because you think that you can just take God's things, his grace and his mercy, and do whatever you want to do with it. Those are the vessels from out of Jerusalem. You think that? You think that you're going to reign supreme forever, no matter what, because you are the United States of America. You got the greatest army and all that kind of stuff. I've been saying this for I don't know how long, and I'm going to keep on saying it. One of my mantras. If God don't keep the city, I don't care what kind of mayor you got. I don't care what kind of government you got, legislation, president, Senate, House, Congress, I don't care what it is. If God don't keep it, border control, armies, nuclear weapons, bullets, ballistic, this, that, whatever it is, if God don't keep it with your strong self, the city will not be kept. That's in the world that you live in, and that's inside of you, because there's a city that's inside of you. Your mind got to be kept. Your heart got to be kept. Your lungs got to be kept. Your imagination got to be kept. Your brain got to be kept. Everything about you got to be kept. And if God ain't touching it, if God don't put his hands on everything about you, it will not be kept, because God is not in it. I hope you got something out of this message on today. I want you to know that I love you. I want you to be blessed. I want you to know that the Lord loves you, and there's nothing that you can do about it. I am Dr. Donnie Eatman. I am the face of Face to Face. I want you to go in God, go in God's love, God's speed, God's mercy, but most of all, I want you to go in God's grace. I want you to share this with a neighbor, friend, or an enemy until we see each other the next time. I want you to be blessed. Shalom.